you?
I'm all right. How are
Are
you?
you enjoying your weekend?
Yeah, this is my first time in Orlando, actually.
Is it?
Yeah, I know, right? I've only been to Miami in Florida, so this is...
And I'm sorry.
That was on the Shaun of the Dead press tour like 20 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy the weather here?
It's quite heavy.
It's
quite
one way to put it. Okay, so we will get started, and I mean, I have to start with the obvious, right? I know everyone's thinking it. I would be remiss if I didn't ask, so let's just get it out of the way. When can fans expect another project between you, Nick Frost, and Edgar Wright?
Well, it's coming out next week.
Year.
Well, Edgar's currently in post-production for The Running Man. And we said the other day, when he finishes post-production for The Running Man, we're going to get together and start cooking something. But Nick has just been cast as Hagrid in Harry Potter, so he's going to be busy for like 10 years. I don't know what we're going to do.
You have to find some time.
We do.
I think we want that, yes? Okay, so you have spoofed horror, you've honored it, you've added emotional weight to it. Is there a moment in your work that you consider to be genuinely disturbing or heartbreaking that's stuck with you?
I think shooting my mum in the face was... Wait, do you mean in the film? That day I remember, because Penelope Wilton, who plays Barbara in Shaun of the Dead, she looks just like my mom. They could be sisters. And that day, and Penelope is such a sweetheart, and we'd all been, hanging out together on this movie, and it came to shoot that scene, and she played it so sympathetically that we were all just crying on that day. I mean, Nick and I just sat on the stairs in the pub, just, I can't do this anymore. That was ripping Dylan Moran apart. Didn't touch the surface, but it was shooting Penelope. Yeah.
I know that you are yourself a big horror fan, and I wanted to know if there is a specific, like a horror director that's current that you haven't worked with yet that you would love to work with.
Oh man, I'm really enjoying Robert Eggers and Ari Aster at the moment, I think, in terms of, Hereditary and The Lighthouse and Nosferatu. I've always loved John Carpenter, and I'd love to make a movie with him. The Thing is one of my favorite movies of all time. So
that's a very, very good one. So if you had to survive a real-life horror situation, whose universe would you least want to be in? Jordan Peele, George Romero, Mike Flanagan, or someone else? Is there someone's universe you don't want to be in real life?
I don't want to be in Zack Snyder's zombie universe, because zombies suck. Well, actually, Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, that was a whole... I mean, Danny never said that they were zombies. They were always infected. I think they got wrongly characterized as zombies, but the speed and the ferocity that outbreak sort of, evolves is just terrifying. I don't know if I could survive a Romero zombie
slow zombies, everybody.
Easy.
Yeah.
That's the fun of them, right?
Right.
You can just whack them in the head, bye-bye. But the rage-infected zombies, no thanks.
Yeah. Do you think that horror comedy, when done right, can be scarier than straight horror because the audience lets their guard down?
That's a good question. I think the thing is with horror comedy is that there's always the cushion of the humor, and however disturbing something is, pretty soon there'll be a laugh and you'll feel better. I think some great examples, films like American Werewolf in London, which I wouldn't characterize as a comedy, but is very funny. And a lot of that's to do with the character work between David Norton and Jack in that, But I was very disturbed by that film as a kid. Particularly the Nazi zombie sequence, David's dream. That really frightened me when I was a child. But I think I think Shaun is like a great entry-level horror for if you're a teenager. It's a good way into the horror world, I think.
I agree. And how old were you when you saw American Werewolf in London the first time?
I was 14. I grew up in the 80s, so, and in the UK we had a kind of, woo for the 80s! We had a big cull on VHS. The head of the censorship board at the time was this woman called Mary Whitehouse, and she just banned a whole load of movies, and some of them were just shit movies, and you know, just schlock. But some good films got caught up in that. Dawn of the Dead was caught up, Evil Dead was caught up in that. And so we were denied. I didn't see Dawn of the Dead until I was like 19, because you just couldn't get it anywhere in the UK. But we used to go to the video shop and hire things like The Thing and American Werewolf and The Howling, Poltergeist, Lemon Popsicle, you know, stuff that we were allowed to hire basically, and watch them in my friend's front room.
Is there a particular franchise that, even after all these years, you keep revisiting as a fan, besides George Romero's work?
I don't know about franchise, because franchise to me feels like it's a fairly recent phenomenon, you know. I always go back to The Shining, I always go back to The Exorcist, you know, films that shook me when I was a kid, you know. I think The Shining is an absolute masterpiece. You know, it's a horror film which takes place entirely in the light. You know, for that so round of applause. But the way that film is edited and scored, and I know Stephen King hates it, but I think, you know, Kubrick just did what he had to do, and it's a great movie.
I agree. If there were a classic horror character that you had the opportunity to play, what would that character be, and how would you make it your own?
R.J. McCready. I just love Kurt Russell. Kurt Russell was our first choice to play Paul in the movie Paul, because we thought it would be hilarious if it was like Kurt Russell, but the studio wanted someone who was relevant to the comedy audience, and we were lucky to get Seth, you know, who I love. But I don't know. It would be hard to make that character my own, just because. Having said that, you know, I had to take on Scotty in Star Trek after one of the most iconic. I mean, James Doohan just is the best, and you know, it was a daunting thing to have to play that part, knowing that there was already someone out there who, you know, just made it so iconic. But yeah, I'd just like to run around in the snow with a flamethrower.
Who wouldn't? So how do you feel that British horror has evolved versus American horror all these years?
Well, it's interesting because like British horror was characterized in the 60s and 70s by the Hammer Studios, and they did a lot of the classic monsters or versions thereof. And then I think what happened was when the Vietnam War was like the first televised war, and a lot of the American horror that followed after that, not long after the Vietnam War, was much more sort of visceral and violent, and it was coming at a time when people had suddenly started seeing quite violent things on television, and the people, like Tom Savini was a photographer in Vietnam, you know, and I think that war was almost responsible for creating the next wave of horror, and that wave of horror kind of eclipsed the British horror scene, because people then wanted to see slasher movies, and they wanted to see violence and gore, and it became about a different kind of thing. If you look at the old Hammers, they're just kind of creepy, and they're not that gory, you know. It's interesting how, you know, current events shape art, and I think the Vietnam War and horror are very related.
100%. And as art does, it usually is a commentary on society and the eras that they're made. What would you say that Shaun of the Dead is commenting on?
I think with Edgar and I saw it as being the anonymity of living in London. How you can literally step over a homeless person and not notice them. You know, the whole sequence in the morning when Shaun walks to the shop, when the zombie apocalypse has started, and he doesn't notice. In fact, he thinks one of the zombies is a homeless person. You know, that kind of. I mean, it's weird because like now it's even more so because we're like this. Everyone's like this. Then it was just, you know, just ignoring everyone, not really being a complete island in a sea of people, and that was kind of what that was about, you know.
And so fans of your films love to find Easter eggs.
Yeah.
is there a particularly sneaky Easter egg that you've hidden that fans have yet to pick up on, or very few fans have picked up on?
That's a really good question. I have no idea. There are so many. One of my favorite is there's a very famous chain of sort of convenience store in the UK called Londis, and we just changed it to Landis in Shaun of the Dead, so that's where Shaun gets his cornetto from. Oh God. Do you know what? To be honest, I can't fucking remember.
Well, now it's our job to find them all. So you've killed zombies, you've evaded cults, you've battled robots. Is there a particular creature or villain that you are dying to face in a film?
I don't know. I think if Edgar and I do something, when Edgar and I do something again, I don't think we'll approach it the way we approached the Cornetto films. You know, we made Shaun because we love zombie films. We made Hot Fuzz because we loved American action movies, you know, and we thought it'd be funny to put an American action movie in a British village. And then, you know, I guess The World's End was came from our love of like social science fiction like John Wyndham, and also shows like Doctor Who. And but I can't really think of like a genre that we want to do now. I think what we will do next is just something that's its own thing. It might be a certain genre, I don't know. But I think our main aim is to disappoint as many people as possible.
You failed, I will tell you that. So, being a fan and growing up watching horror, how has your understanding of horror evolved from the fan perspective as a kid to starring in and co-writing and participating in the genre itself?
Oh, it's been a real privilege, you know. I mean, Edgar and I we'd shot a scene in our sitcom where my character was fighting zombies, and we finished that and we thought, we should make a movie. And that's how Shaun was born, and then suddenly we found ourselves being kind of lifted up by, you know, the horror icons that we loved growing up, like Stephen King and John Carpenter and Greg Nicotero and George Romero, first and foremost. And to get to participate, one of the greatest days for Edgar and I, we went to Pittsburgh for the premiere of Land of the Dead, and we met so many of George's sort of repertory company and all the actors that had been in Night and Dawn and Day, and we got to be in Land of the Dead, and I got to wear Howard Sherman's Bub makeup, you know, like my favorite zombie in all of zombie films is Bub from Day of the Dead. It was this beautiful, sympathetic, tragic character who you root for more than you do for the people, you know. And to be walking around on a George Romero film set with Bub's face doesn't get much better than that.
All right, this one's going to be a tough one.
Okay.
If you could assemble an all-star cast of your favorite horror characters across all of the entire horror landscape for a film, which actors would you assemble?
Like an Avengers team up.
Yeah, of horror.
Of horror. I think I would get Bruce Campbell as Ash. I'd get Griffin Dunn as Jack from American Werewolf. Kurt Russell.
Yes.
Shaun, obviously me in there to be fighting. Who else would I get? Who should I get? Sigourney, yes! Oh my God.
Excellent. Yeah.
When we did Paul, and we managed to persuade Sigourney to come and do that, we had a moment in the movie when Blythe Danner, who plays Tara, who owned the dog that Paul's ship crashed when he landed, she says to Sigourney Weaver, "Get away from her, you bitch," right? And we were doing the scene, and Blythe was like, "No, I just don't know how to say this." And Sigourney came over and she said, "It's like this. Get away from her, you bitch!" And me and Nick just went, "Ooh."
I love that you are fanboys yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very happy. So I have one or two more questions for Simon, but I know that many of you have questions for him. So if you have a question for him, go ahead and start lining up here at the microphone, and we will start calling on you all. Careful now. Don't get too excited, I promise. We're going to try to get to all of you. So if you had to host a double feature of your own films, what two films would you choose?
That's hard because if it's only a double feature, it's the kind of, I wouldn't know which of the cornetto, Shaun and Hot Fuzz obviously were first. I've got a lot of love for The World's End because I feel like it was our sort of old man film, it was our sort of darker. So I'd not want to leave out The World's End. So I would pick films that no one has seen. So I would say A Fantastic Fear of Everything.
That's a good movie.
Thank you. And Hector and the Search for Happiness, which is a very sweet film, very uplifting. Nothing to do with horror, sorry.
And why would you choose those two films?
Because no one fucking saw them.
That is a solid reason. All right, we're going to go ahead and throw it to you.
Okay, so I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One, if you could think of there's a lot of bloopers and gaffes and silliness. What one of the bloopers that you laughed the most and couldn't stop laughing?
Yeah.
And then I want to know what the brand of that pin is that Shaun, Tom Cruise gave you. The pin that you.
The pin?
Yeah, he gave you a pin that you said wrote so wonderfully.
Oh, a pen.
A pen.
Sorry, that's my Britishness. Thinking you'll say pin.
Pen.
A pen.
Pen. Pen. Writing.
Well,
Pen.
in Shaun of the Dead, Nick and I have terrible trouble sometimes because we make each other laugh so much. And there was the scene where we were pretending, we were rehearsing pretending to be zombies, and we just couldn't do it. Every time Nick did his zombie impression, I would laugh, and then you can feel the crew sort of starting to get a bit like, oh, fucking come on, we got to finish our day, and that just makes it worse and worse and worse. And it just became, we were just apoplectic, crying, just felt awful. It feels good though. It's a weird kind of pleasure you get from that kind of laugh. In terms of the pen, I have no idea what you're talking about. Did he give me a pen?
He gave you a very nice pen, and you said it wrote so well and you didn't believe him. And it was apparently a really expensive pen.
He probably did. He gives me a lot of presents. That's how he keeps me sweet. Do you know what I mean? He gives me shit. He bought me a snowboard for my birthday one year when I was going snowboarding in Vancouver, and I wasn't really allowed to because it's against the insurance. But if Tom says I can, then I can.
Do you get the coconut cake?
I get a coconut cake every birthday, and I also get a gingerbread house at Christmas. And one year, that's because my daughter has known him. When she was about 2, I was going away to shoot Rogue Nation or something. Or maybe she was a bit older, 3 or 4. And I said, I've got to go away, sweetheart. I've got to go away and film in Morocco for a bit. And she said, why? And I said, I'm going to work with Tom Cruise. And she said, who's that? And I said, you remember we got that nice cashmere blanket for Christmas? That he bought us that. She went, oh yeah, the blanket man. So she used to call Tom the blanket man when she was very young. But she's grown up sort of knowing him, and he's very, very sweet with her. They have a really lovely relationship. But he still sees her as being this little girl. So every Christmas we get this fucking huge gingerbread house. And I'm like, give us the cake, man. I can't get through this thing. So I remember the cakes, not the pin.
Nick.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
My name is Barbara.
Hi, Barbara. Going to get you, Barbara.
With future characters, aside, and they're coming, of the characters you currently have that in your pocket,
Yeah.
which character do you consider to be the reigning jewel in your crown?
Well, I mean, Gary fucking King, obviously, from The World's End. I love playing Gary because I love characters that are outwardly something and inwardly something else. And it was enormous fun for me to be the chaotic character, because before I was always the kind of the straight man, Shaun, Ed was the chaos, Danny was the chaos, but in The World's End, Gary is the chaos. And I got sober maybe, I think, 2 or 3 years prior to making The World's End. And so it's a very personal film for me because a lot of his impulses I share with him, and remember that feeling when you have an addiction, you grow a new personality, and that personality runs your life, and you'll do anything for that personality, or that personality will do anything no matter what you say, you know? And so playing Gary to me felt like exercising certain demons. So I'd say Gary King. There's only one Gary King.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello.
Hi.
So, my question is about Mandela effects.
Oh,
For
yeah.
instance, my favorite Mandela effect is Friday the 13th. Everybody recognizes the iconic but it's not. It's words. It's kill, kill, kill.
Oh, right, yeah.
So,
Yeah.
my question is, do you have moments where people say, I love it when you did this, and you're like, that didn't happen? Or do you have a favorite Mandela effect?
Like when someone said, the pen. Yeah.
Going full circle.
I remember when we did Space, Pegg did Pegg. There was an episode where our dog gets kidnapped, and we did a lot of watch out in the score for that. And I think Edgar had stolen that from like Dario Argento or something, from like the Bird with the Crystal Plumage or some obscure Gallo movie. But yeah, I like that. I like that technique. It's always interesting. I love actually, it's not really the Mandela effect, but I love the score to Arrival. Johan Johansson used to use a lot of vocals in his scores, and I always think that's really an effective. I don't know, it's somehow creepier than instruments. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Shaun.
Hi.
So you've been in a lot of movies, Star Wars, Star Trek, but my favorite character that you've done is Buck. And you're super funny in it, right? But what I wanted to ask you is, when you do these characters, where do you go to become that person? Because it's not you. It's partly you, but it's not you. So where do you go?
Yeah. I love playing Buck the Weasel. He's one of my favorite characters I've ever played, and doing a Buck session is always the most fun because it's just you in a room with a microphone. But I'm so physical when I do Buck because you can't help but be physical because he's insane. And I'm just recording the new Ice Age movie at the moment, and there's some smashing stuff for Buck in it. I guess you just sort of. It took us a while to find him. When I first I took the Ice Age, it's a different movie, but a good one. When I did, or Ass Age, as you would say, we tried a couple of voices. The first was sort of like this kind of swashbuckling, sort of John Cleese kind of character, and it didn't quite fit. And then we just sort of loosened him up, and they wanted him to be a bit more parochial. They became like, a bit of a Cockney, and then we pulled that back a little bit to what Buck became. So you just sort of, you have the picture, you have an animatic of the character, and you kind of look at how they look, and I don't know, you sort of key into that, and that's how you get it. But yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Thank you, Simon.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your question.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
First off, I just wanted to say I love Fantastic Fear of Everything.
Thank you.
Phenomenal movie.
Thanks.
I know that Gary King is a very deep character, underlying, but I just wanted to know who ended up picking out Sisters of Mercy for his character, like his favorite band, because, that's really got me into goth music.
Really?
You did.
I was a massive Sisters fan when I was a kid. I was 16.
You gotta get the living room now.
Come on. And the Sisters were like my favorite band, and my whole bedroom was plastered with them, and I had every single album and 12-inch, and I was lucky enough to go see them a few years back, and I met Andrew Eldritch, who's the lead singer, and because when we were doing The World's End, and we said, can we use all this Sisters of Mercy merchandise? And they were like, you're not making fun of us, are you? And I'm like, no, I fucking love you guys, So that was my way of, declaring my love for my teenage self. No, my teenage self's taste. I did a lot of declaring love for my teenage self at the time. But don't we all? Don't we all?
Well, you're certainly the reason I've been going to a goth dance club for 2 years
Awesome,
now.
that's
so
great.
thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question.
Hello, Simon.
Hi.
If an alien like Paul came down to Earth and you were hanging out with him and he wanted to see one of the Cornetto trilogy, which one would you select to show him and why?
Probably Shaun of the Dead, I guess, because that's where it begins. You know, that's where the sort of story commences. I'd probably show him Paul, because he'd be like, wow, this is like me. But Edgar is adamant that that never be included in any Cornetto. Like, I remember once Universal were trying to box set Shaun, Hot Fuzz, and Paul, and Edgar was like, no. You know, because our films are our films, and this is a different thing. Same with Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver are different. You know, our little corner is our little corner. So yeah, probably Shaun of the Dead. I mean, who knows what he would like? Do you know what I mean? Or she, or it.
Thank you. I love all three very much.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Hello, Pickle.
Hello.
Just a quick question. Did you actually do any real-life training for Run Fat Boy Run?
No. I did Run Fat Boy Run just after Hot Fuzz, so I was in actually really good shape. So I had to wear a fat suit and stuff. And I kind of run, you know, I do run occasionally. I never had to run a marathon, although I might run the London Marathon next year, myself and Hayley Atwell, talking about running a marathon together. Yeah.
Cool, thanks, man.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
This may be an insensitive question, and you don't have to answer if you don't want to.
Hit me.
But in The World's End, what gave you the idea to make Gary King suffer with self-harm?
Well, the thing that Edgar and I thought would be hilarious would be to make a comedy about a suicidal alcoholic, because that just felt right, you know. Gary at the beginning, we see him in a therapy group, you know, probably in a psychiatric hospital, and the point of Gary is that underneath all that bravado and all that sort of like, you know, humor and chaos is someone who's really, really suffering. You know, who's someone who had got to the point where, if you forgive me, had tried to take his own life, you know. And you don't discover that until the very last moment when you know, Andy sees his wrists are bandaged. And that, for us, we just wanted this moment when everything made sense. In fact, we wanted people to kind of hate Gary and then suddenly realize, oh shit, no, he's been going through something. Which is because it's very easy for us to dismiss people who are, you know, neurodivergent or whatever, because they're, you know, the words like mad and crazy were used way too much to describe people who are probably, you know, in the throes of something that's genuine and real. And so we wanted Gary to have a dark, dark secret that totally redefined how we felt about him in that moment, you know. Oh no, hang on, he's in trouble. And this has all been because he has nothing else but this, you know. So that's where that came from. That's a great question, thank you.
Hi, Simon. Josh.
Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So it's a little cliche, but I wanted to ask, what would you say is your most memorable moment, like that you filmed during the Cornetto trilogy, like something crazy that happened behind the scenes?
From the Cornetto trilogy, I don't know, like rocking up on the first day for Shaun of the Dead, you know, and seeing the sets built, and it's very strange when you write something. I was still pretty inexperienced then, you know. Jess and I had written Spaced, and that, stepping onto the set of that show into the flat and realizing that someone had read our script and built all this stuff, you know, was a remarkable moment. And I think just the feeling of something that you've written and is going to become the creation of so many people, it's an amazing feeling, you know. You realize that it was a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. And so yeah, that first day on Shaun was like, holy fuck, we're making a movie.
And partial question, if you wanted to do a sequel out of the Cornetto, which one would it be?
Probably Hot Fuzz, because I feel like Hot Fuzz, you know, you could have the further adventures of Nick and Danny. You know, Shaun of the Dead is a story which has a beginning, a middle, and an end. To sequelize Shaun of the Dead would mean you'd have to undo the resolution of that film. And then whenever you watch Shaun of the Dead, you'd be like, oh, well, this isn't the end. They're going to go through some other shit with vampires or werewolves or whatever, you know? And I never wanted that. I want that Edgar and I both want that film to end. And I mean, Hot Fuzz does too. You know, the kind of the end of Hot Fuzz is supposed to be very ambiguous. I mean, it essentially looks like a neo-fascist state at the end of Hot Fuzz. They're kind of beating up vandals who spray painted the bins and stuff. It's supposed to. The idea is that the NWA have just been replaced by another oppressive regime, which is what happens in society. They always say, as soon as you destroy the oppressor, destroy yourself, because you'll just end up aping the oppressor. Christ, this is like being in university. I can't even remember the fucking question.
We're talking about sequels.
That's it, yeah. So Hot Fuzz, yeah. It's called Hot Fuzz, nice and Nazi.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You got white on you.
Thank you. Next question.
Okay.
You got this, come on.
Hello, Mr. Pegg.
Hello.
Yeah. The World's End is one of my favorite tried and trues, but I will ask you, what was it like traveling for Hector and his pursuit of happiness to different regions of the world? Is it worth going to all sorts of regions of the world? Did you do that, or did you kind of stay in the studio kind of thing?
No, we did a lot of traveling. We shot some of it in Vancouver. We went to Shanghai. We went to Tibet. We got arrested by the Chinese government, put under house arrest, had our passports confiscated, and then forced to leave the country. That was fun.
So you really were on the pursuit of happiness. I love your glasses, by the way. I will be Googling them.
Oh, thank you. Tom Ford.
Tom Ford.
Yeah, and then we went to South Africa and Austria. It was wonderful. It was one of my favorite ever shoots, just because of the sheer sort of breadth of travel that we did. But I remember I was watching the Red Wedding episode of Game of Thrones, right? I was in some little tinky motel in Kengding in Tibet, where there's a suppression going on that the Chinese government don't really want people to know about. And they thought that we were there to make some sort of documentary or something, because we had like monks' costumes and army costumes hanging up, for the laundry. And there was suddenly this banging on the door. And I was so disturbed because of the Red Wedding, because it's a terrible episode of the show. And then we all got dragged down, bundled into these cars and driven down these, I thought we were going to get whacked. But other than that, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you for your question.
Hello, my
Hi.
name is Robert Farrell.
Hi, Robert.
So besides from Shaun of the Dead, what's your second favorite scary movie out of all of them?
Out of all scary movies, or
All of them.
I would probably say, I think The Shining. I've got a big soft spot for The Shining. I just think it's such a brilliant sort of coming together of image and sound and music and performance. It's just a really special film, and I remember being really chilled by it the first time I saw it. Just moments like Jack staring out of the window, just brilliant, really, really good. I think that's up there with my favorites.
Nice meeting you.
You too, man. Thanks,
Thank
Rob.
you.
Hi, I'm Alex. So I want to talk about Mission Impossible. Do you feel like will they ever make another Mission Impossible movie?
Yeah. Of course we will. I mean, we never said it was the last one. People kind of
it seemed like it.
Yeah, and it was inferred from the title. It's The Final Reckoning.
Yeah, they got the entity, everything.
Yeah, the Grateful Dead did like 20 farewell tours. I mean, we're going to do another one, I'm sure. If you haven't seen the Final Reckoning, I don't know if I'm going to be in the ensuing films. You'll have to find out by going to see the film. But I would think so. I mean, Tom's he's not slowing down. You can't keep that guy in one place. He's a nightmare. He's bound to do it again.
And one more. If you got the chance to do it again, would you?
Which?
The Mission Impossible movies, would you do it again if they're...
Oh, fuck yeah. Absolutely. I love those films. It's always an adventure. Hanging out with that guy is just nuts. It's just like, it's just ridiculous.
His stunts are nuts.
He is. I mean, I worry about him. I do worry about him. There are days when I'm like, just biting my nails all day long because I'm thinking I'm going to get a call saying, "Oh, Tom's dead."
That'd be a nightmare.
He's a one-off. He's an amazing guy. Very strange, but amazing.
Thank you.
As a real fanboy and someone who considers nerd not a slur, what is something that you have read, something, you know, in the comic book verse, something that you really like that maybe a lot of people don't know about, or something that you're following now, just really leaning into the comic kind of side?
I confess.
Or just superheroes, you know.
Yeah, I don't read as many comic books as I used to. But back in the day, I was a big fan of the British comic book scene, 2000 AD. There was a great strip called Strontium Dog, which is all about a sort of these sort of mutant bounty hunters, and it was set in like Milton Keynes, which is you guys would never even heard of that place. It's like just north of London. It's kind of a concrete hell, and but it was very funny, and I'd love to see that done properly. You know, it's difficult because you couldn't get it made because not enough people know it. Everything these days is about recognizable IP.
I mean, they made Tank Girl.
They did make Tank Girl, you know, and it wasn't a terrible movie. It was a valiant stab, but these days it's like now they're trying to give side characters who no one gives a shit about movies, and like Morbius and Hunter, Craven the Hunter, things like that, because there's no one left because they've done everyone else. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know. I think maybe we're in for a period soon when the comic book movie might disappear for a bit. I think it might need to, just for a little bit. You know? Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Regroup. Thank you.
Next question.
Hello.
Hello.
Apparently, people say the name. I'm Justin Kent. I wanted to ask, what was it like to go from space? I don't know if it was, congruent with The Boys with Garth Ennis. Was there any sort of communication because you were in that series, the graphic novel?
Yes.
The whole way through. So
yeah.
Was there any sort of communication?
No. Somebody told me, I can't remember who it was, that, oh, you were in a comic book. And I was like, what? And it's called The Boys, so I looked it up, and there I was, you know, sort of as Wee Huey, as he was called in the comics. And I was incredibly flattered, and I got in touch with Derek, and I felt like a backhanded compliment, because he obviously thought I'd never amount to anything enough to be able to sue him for my likeness rights. You know? It was like, oh, he must have thought, oh, he's cool, but he'll never be able to afford to sue me, so I'll just draw him. And then, you know, that comic book, I remember DC, who published it initially, they sent me a whole letter sort of saying, please don't sue us. Sign this that says we can use the likeness. I was like, sure, I don't mind. I wasn't gonna, I didn't take offense. I was thrilled, you know. It was like, hey, I'm in a comic book. I didn't have to do anything. And then when Eric Kripke did the series, he just contacted me and says, look, we'd really like you to be in the show in some capacity, just because you were the original Huey. And I said, well, why don't I play Huey's dad? And so they wrote the character for me to play, and really to just do a little cameo in the first season. And then during COVID, I did like a scene on the phone to Huey, like I shot it in my house on my iPhone. And then Eric contacted me, a couple of years ago and said, oh, we've got a nice storyline that involves you being asleep for 4 episodes, and then waking up and causing havoc. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So that was fun, and I really loved that episode where Hugh wakes up and is, all V'd up and deadly. It was really fun to play. And Jack Quaid, for me, is my Huey. He's so great. Jack, he's such a wonderful human being, and he's made that part his own. So I was honoured.
Thank you.
2 of 3, one thing. Oh, hold on. 2 and 3. Anyway, if there's anything you could say, first thing you think of, advice, or I don't know, just a nice thing to say.
Advice about what? Fly fishing?
Whatever you want. Fly fishing, yes, please.
About the pen? If someone gives you a pen, remember. Just write it down. I have a pen.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
My name's Shaun.
Hi, Shaun.
Spelled the same way as in the movie.
Good.
I'm wondering, most of the time I run into other Shauns, it's spelled like S-E-A-N or S-H-A-W-N.
Yeah.
Any particular reason why you went with S-H-A-U-N, the superior way of spelling Shaun?
Well, we didn't want to spell it the S-E-A-N way in case anyone, and there would have been some, who would have seen it as Scene of the Dead. I know most people are very familiar with the traditional, that particular spelling of Shaun. Shaun with a W felt too on the nose. It was like, it felt too much like we were leaning into the pun. And so that spelling of Shaun, the Irish spelling of Shaun, just felt like the right way to go. And that's how Shaun Riley, as his name was born, came about.
Nice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shaun.
Thank you, Shaun.
Hi there, my name is Dirk.
Hi, Dirk.
It is a great job you did with a very nuanced accent. But how did you end up in a movie about a talking mongoose?
That was, that's a true story. It happened on the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is an island off the sort of northwest of England. The people of the Isle of Man are quite strange. I shot a movie in the Isle of Man once, and my driver used to wake me up on the way to work in the car, like 4 in the morning, to say hello to the fairies when we went over to over a certain bridge. They have strong beliefs, and I just got this script about this story of this paranormal investigator who goes over to investigate the phenomenon of a talking mongoose. And the film's all about belief, and if it's a good thing, it's about faith, really. It's like if faith makes you feel good, if faith brings you some comfort, brings you some community, then what's wrong with that? It was a kind of, I guess it was a sort of religious metaphor about the relative importance of religion in society. I'm an atheist, but I think religion is a good thing. I think it'd be great if there was one religion. That'd be fantastic. Everyone should believe in the same thing. There'd be far less arguments, and it would create loads of community and goodness, because most religions are essentially all about just be nice to each other. It's weird how most of the people that follow it don't do that. But, who knew? So, I don't know why I went off on that tangent, but there you go. Nice to be of service.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
By Simon Pegg. Next.
Hello.
Hello.
My question was, so a zombie apocalypse breaks out in here. What's your first move?
In here? How did you fucking know?
I mean, zombies usually make themselves known. They start fighting people, and there's usually screaming of some sort, mostly from the women.
Yes. Well, I'd be fortunate because I'm up here on the stage, and as soon as I heard that kick off, I'd be that way. I'd be gone.
What are you grabbing for a weapon?
I don't know. I was just looking around for something blunt, and maybe this lighting stand. Maybe this guy. He's quite sturdy. It depends. If it was the fast ones, when it just all kicks off, what could you do? Nothing. The slow ones, you'd be like, why is this person biting everybody?
Shaun of the Dead zombies.
Yeah, Shaun of the Dead zombies. Yeah, I like the fact that in Romero's films you never really see how. It's always after it's happened. You don't see the actual propagation of the condition, whatever the hell it is, the virus, whatever. Romero had read I Am Legend, and wondered what would that be like if you actually saw it happening, kind of thing. But you always join it when they've already kind of overrun. So I don't know. I feel like I'm waffling. You really put me on the spot.
I did want to say thank you for the Shaun of the Dead movie. It got me through a very difficult time in my life, and
Good.
Adding comedy to a horror genre, especially zombies, I have a particular love for them. So, being able to laugh in a dark time was just.
Well, that's my pleasure. That's the nicest thing you can ever hear about your work. Thank you.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
My name is Carmen. Similar to the last speaker, I just wanted to say how much I really resonate with you talking about your sobriety, because I was I'm a recovering alcoholic of 2.5 years, so that just means a lot to see that. So I love Shaun of the Dead, and Liz is one of my favorite characters of yours as a ex-girlfriend.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about the process of writing her and kind of crafting her and Shaun's relationship?
One thing Edgar and I really struggle with is writing women, because we're men. And how can you possibly know a tiny bit of what it means to be a woman when you're a man? The answer is nothing. We didn't want her to be a nag. We really didn't want her to be the baddie. We didn't want her to be spoiling the fun. We wanted her argument for Shaun's sort of, not acting like a slob for the rest of his life. We wanted that to feel valid and just, and that what she was saying was. Can we have some quiet at the back?
No kidding.
Guys at the back.
Keep it down backstage.
Backstage. Jesus. Anyway. You're welcome. So yeah, we tried as best we could to not make her feel like an antagonist, you know, because that would be such a cliche, the naggy girlfriend. We wanted her to be someone that, you know, you wanted her and Shaun to be together. Inevitably, though, it's a movie about Shaun and Ed, you know, as it always is, that's always the romance between Shaun and Ed, between Nick and Danny, between Gary and Andy. But I'm glad that you like her, because that was the hardest thing for us, you know. That's why I wrote Spaced with Jessica, is because we both wanted the show to have a very even gender split, you know. So it felt like it was coming from the psyche of me and her. It's harder to do when you've both got a penis. Between us.
All right, we have time for the last two questions.
Hey, I'm Steven.
Hi.
My high school drama teacher used to love to say, there's no such thing as small parts, only small actors.
Yes.
And one of my favorite characters from Hot Fuzz was Elizabeth Coleman's Doris.
Yes.
I don't think there's one line she said that's not hysterical.
Doris Thatcher, yes.
Yes, I mean, you know, that's a little bit like girl on girl. Of course, since then, her career has gone to another stratosphere.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what do you think of, you know, what's happened to her career since, and do you still stay in touch with her, you know?
With Olivia? Yeah, of course. Okay. Collie, who we call her. Yeah, I mean, she is the sweetest person, and she's a great dramatic actor, and, you know, was doing a lot of comedy, because she's brilliant at comedy. But I think with often comedic actors, or actors that can do comedy, can do drama, because I think to do comedy, you have to understand the facets of drama so you can make fun of them, you know? And Olivia is like so good at that. So when she got cast in The Favourite, it was just so exciting. And then when she got nominated, it was just like one of us is at the Oscars. This is incredible. So yeah, I love it. I love her. She's the sweetest person. It couldn't happen to a nicer girl. So go Collie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, last question.
Hi.
Hello. First, I would say my country love your movies. I'm from Brazil.
Thank you.
The second, little cliche, but is possible or chance to have the second poll?
I'd like to do another Paul, actually. I feel like we did write, like with Shaun, we had this idea, like, if we ever did do a sequel to Shaun of the Dead, it would be called From Dusk Till Shaun. If you watch Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, in the New York, one of the sequences in Times Square, there is a poster for From Dusk Till Shaun, because it's like an alternative universe where we made a sequel. The sequel to Paul was going to be called Paul's. And I had a whole kind of story for it and everything. I think the trouble is these days, the mid-budget comedy is almost like a bit of a thing of the past. You don't really see, even those kind of Judd Apatow comedies, you don't really see them anymore. And I think that's got something to do with streaming and the way that theatrical presentation has changed, and you know, the push towards cinema releases being all about spectacle. I don't know if we get bankrolled to make Paul 2. You know, I'd love to do it. It would be great fun, just to work with those people again. You know, I had so much fun on that movie. My daughter was born while I was shooting it. I've got such a lot of love for that film because it, you know, it has resonance for me emotionally. So, if anyone ever wanted to make it, sure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Well, we are out of time. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today. Please put your hands together one more time.